Divine, your speaker is off.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, hello everybody. Welcome to panel 1 of the LSE PfAL presentations for this weekend. And panel 1 deals with the interdisciplinary panel, which focuses on the private sector in Africa, which also looks at development, technology, and aspects to do with the 3 topics. So my name is Gino Kumu, and I shall be moderating this panel. And I would like to start with a brief background of our speakers who will further appropriately introduce themselves during their presentation. But I will take about 5 minutes to introduce the 3 speakers. And each speaker is going to have about 18 minutes to present and time for questions. So I hope you bear with us with the time constraints. So our first speaker is Madhvi Muthu. She's a PfAL 2 alumni from Mauritius. And Madhvi is an economist specializing in social policy, development, and gender. So what she's going to speak about today, her topic is working at the nexus of development and the private sector. And each speaker focuses on about 3 to 4 questions. So Madhvi's questions focus on the next 3 questions I'm going to talk about. So her first question is, when you build a project meant to have development impacts and to make money in a country, which comes first? Is it the development or the drive for money? The development goals or the need to make profit? So which comes first? Is it the development goals or the need to make profits for this project? Why is it important to take this approach? That's Madhvi's first question. Her second question is, what is the role of government when it works at the nexus of the private sector and development? What does the government have to do when it comes to development on certain projects? And finally, her last question is, 2 years into the project, after some time into the project, do you still think that whichever approach you took, is it the right approach? And that's Madhvi for you. So our second speaker is Heba Sharma. Heba Sharma is a PfAL 8 alumni, and she's from Egypt. She's the case studies coordinator of the Education 2.0 Research and Documentation Project, which is RDP, a collaboration between the MOET and the Social Research Center at the American University of Cairo. And her topic today will be studying educational reforms in the digital age, which is very important. And she's going to focus on 3 to 4 questions. The first one being, there has been a move in Egypt towards digital transformation of the education sector. What has this entailed? And the second question is, how did Egypt transition during COVID to online schooling? Which is also related to her third question, which states that, how did your project, the RDP project, which is reflected in question 1, study schooling during COVID-19? And to further expand on that question, there is another question which states that, what research methods did the RDP use and how did you organize the online study remotely? How was this done in Egypt? And finally, Heba's question would be, how did you incorporate social media and apps into your data collection? What were the pros and the cons during this research? And our final speaker today will be Divine Betty, who has a very large bio. Divine is an information security consultant and an entrepreneur in hotel development and renewable energy. He served in the British Army for almost 6 years or more and was deployed in countries such as Iraq, Afghanistan, and he also went on to earn his master's degree in international relations from LSE. And I think he is a godfather when it comes to PfAL because he's from PfAL 5. Also, he works in information security roles before joining RightCure Insurance and InfoSec consultation. Divine primarily works with clients and partners on ISO 27001 and ISME governance. So I think we have a very well-versed array of speakers, and we should proceed right through to Madvi. Welcome, Madvi. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you. As Jean mentioned, I'm Advi. I'm from Mauritius, and I train as an economist and specialize in social policy and development at the LSE. I happened to attend LSE back in 2008 as a graduate student before PFAL existed and had the opportunity to go back. In 2012 as part of cohort 2 and again in 2014 as part of the LSE Africa Summit. I can tell you from firsthand experience that PFAL changed the landscape of African presence at the LSE. There are so many more of us now than there was a decade ago, and African issues are being told, discussed, and researched by Africans, which add so much more depth to the narrative and to our stories. Since completing graduate school, I have been working as an international development professional at Pan African level. I've worked for numerous development agencies, multinational organizations, development banks, NGOs, government, you name it, I've tried it. After moving across the continent to work for different development actors and trying to find the right fit for myself, I've come to realize that the nagging feeling I had when I first started working in 2010 was correct. The development field, as we know it, is broken. It pays well, but it is inefficient, bureaucratic, wasteful, and full of nepotism. I was very dissatisfied with the field and decided I wanted to do development differently. At the time when I thought that, I didn't know what that meant, just that something had to give. That's what started my search for different approaches in creating impact for people's lives. Very often, development projects are built with the sole objectives of helping people, but there are no long-term plan on how to sustain those impacts after the duration of the project. There's often hope that these projects would take a life of their own after the funding is over, but I can say in 10 years of working, I have seen no example of that unless this is properly engineered. So unless you engineer sustainability and integrate a way for the project to finance itself past the project funding cycle, this never happens. So I'll use my project, which is called Bees with Stories, to showcase how I merge social impact and financial sustainability in one project. Back in 2016, I came across a conservation project where one of the activities promoted was beekeeping. Beekeeping was used to generate additional income from honey sales for smallholder farmers. This extra money was meant to deter the farmers from engaging in the sale of timber products, which was causing deforestation. When I heard this, I thought, oh, what a great idea. Why isn't this done on a larger scale? Where does the honey go? Where can I buy some? I was keen to find out more and decided to do my own research on African beekeeping. The more I learned, the more I became engrossed with the apiculture value chain and its potential, not just for the farmers, but also for the environment, especially in the African context. So, following a year of research, I set out to design Bees with Stories, a project meant to engineer social impact through the commercialization of honey, sourced exclusively from Africa. The beekeepers involved in the project earn money in two ways. One, by selling bulk honey to us, and two, by sharing in the profit made from the sale of retail honey, after we have transformed the bulk honey. Though our goal is to have a social impact on the lives of farmers, the project is built on a profit-making model. Profit making is essential. Um, why did I take this approach? Why is making money so important? So, through my research, I came across a dozen beekeeping projects in South Africa, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria, and Ethiopia. All of them were funded by development agencies. In all of them, beekeeping was discussed as a development tool to help smallholder farmers diversify their income. The bulk of the donor funds and labor was focused on honey production. Once the honey was harvested, all of these projects faced the same issues. The beekeepers were unable to, one, access the market to sell their harvest, and if they did, they were unable to fetch a fair price for it. Lack of traceability, poor branding, poor packaging, high transaction costs, weak negotiating skills, poor market information were some of the underlying reasons of why they couldn't access market and get a decent price. So to make my project work, I had to do things differently. My prior deep dive into the apiculture sector allowed me to understand the bottlenecks along the value chain. So I knew what the problems were. So I had to figure out how to fix them. My goal was to help the beekeepers access premium export markets in two ways. First, at local level, we were aware that many beekeepers were not currently producing honey that met export standards. So we partnered with local technical institutions to provide technical assistance to the beekeepers to help them improve their beekeeping techniques. And at market level, we established a common brand and a common distribution network to sell our different honey varietals sourced from different countries. The objective was to capitalize on common aspects such as suppliers' relationships, branding, trade show attendance, etc., to put African honey varietals on the map while making optimal use of our resources, which we have little of. So, in theory, that didn't sound too difficult. In practice, this turned out to be a whole lot more complicated. We had to test for the quality of our different honey varietals, decipher export procedures in each African country, decipher import procedures in the country where the honey was headed, in our case, the UK, find a custom agents willing to clear our products. Most of them didn't want to touch us because we were not only African, but honey is an animal product. Pick the right glass container to meet EU standards, design a label that was not only aesthetically appealing to the UK market, but also that met the EU market requirements. Apply and be audited so that we could use the certified organic logo on our jars, and attend a trade show so buyers and distributors could sample our product and be interested in our products. So the list goes on. And so this is what any beekeeper would have to go through if they wanted to sell in the UK. So by using our brand, Bees with Stories, the headaches and the cost of entering new premium markets for the beekeepers are shifted to us. The risk of pursuing new market is also borne by us. We buy the bulk honey from the beekeepers at a premium price, which we then bottle and package for the retail market. All our beekeepers are from remote, underserved communities. So I'm sure you can appreciate how difficult it would be for any of them to incur any of these costs or risk mentioned. So we've progressed, and at this point in time, after we've done all this, we are currently in discussion with the distributor in the UK for a possible launch early next year. So in doing all of this, what is the role of that the government plays? So working at the nexus of the private sector and development doesn't mean that you don't need the government or that the latter does not have a role to play. In my beekeeping case, the government is essential as it lays the framework within which we operate. Even more so, as apiculture remains highly informal in most African countries and so does not benefit from a well-informed, institutionalized framework. For example, in Mauritius, where my company is registered, the framework is constantly evolving as the interest in beekeeping increases. In 2016, the ministry decided to encourage beekeeping and launched several incentives for local beekeepers. This included the exemption of taxes on imported beekeeping equipment, access to tax-free utility vehicles, and free beekeeping workshops. However, there was a gap in the policy implementation. These benefits were only accessible to registered individual beekeepers. The policy was in practice deterring beekeepers from formalizing their business and forming a company. So after a whole year of lobbying, the ministry had agreed to extend the same benefits to beekeeping companies. Another example of the role of government at Pan-African level has to do with the specificities of our honey. African honey often do not pass the conventional quality test for honey. This is because most research on honey had been done to date in Europe, New Zealand, the US, and all use honey from these regions. So the parameters for lab tests were calibrated with non-African honeys. When our honey is tested, we show up as fake. This is a recurrent issue for most African honey. And for this to be resolved, government entities have to not only develop their own lab tests, but also lobby to include our specific quality parameters in international standard. So it's been 2 years since I started Bees with Stories, and do I still think that this was the right approach? In a nutshell, yes. It's not the easiest path, especially when it comes to accessing funds. I built Bees with Stories to make it profitable within a couple of years after we start selling. So far, I've invested my own funds and raised some through a Kickstarter campaign, which I did last year. I applied. I have applied to call for proposal from international donors in the past, but we were never lucky. Donors are notorious for chasing what's trendy, and beekeeping, especially African beekeeping, is hardly that. We don't use AI, we don't use blockchain, we don't use drones, so we never make the cut. I also applied to the National Social Inclusion Foundation in Mauritius, a foundation meant to address poverty through the work of NGOs and social enterprises. And although they like our idea, the foundation's official definition of a social enterprise is one that makes no profit. So we were not eligible. I also tried a couple of commercial banks in Mauritius, but again, they use a traditional assessment method, which do not integrate the social aspect of our project. So for them, our project is not as profitable for them as we could be. I've had a few investors be interested in our project, but I'm currently not exploring that option. So yes, this approach is not the easiest, but access to fund is not a problem that's like specific to us. A lot of startups face the same issue, especially from the developing world. Funding mechanisms have yet to adapt to new ways of doing things. But if I were to adapt to what the donors and banks are looking for, my project would actually turn into a traditional development project or a purely profit-making one, and I don't want that. So obviously, there are repercussions to how I am implementing my project. I am moving at a much slower pace. If I were to get a huge injection of money, but I wanted to do development differently, and I think that comes with the territory. So yes, we are moving at a slower pace, but we are moving in the right direction. So I'm okay with that. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering your questions.
So Madhvi, are you there?
Yes. Yes.
I have 3 questions from the audience, and the first one is, it comes from Nirina. Yeah?
Okay.
So she's asking, if you quantify it, what amount of things did you have to learn from the scratch, stroke, adapt as it goes? What have you learned from the beginning? And how have you adapted as it proceeds?
You want to, I answer one at a time? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Because we have 3 questions.
So the whole...
We have 8 minutes.
Okay. So the whole...
Did you understand it?
Yeah. So to answer your question, so yes, I have a business background, so I was able to put the business part, the big business structure of the company fairly easily. I was able to incorporate the development aspect of the project fairly easily within the project, but in a theoretical sense. there was a lot of learning to be done when it came to the implementation. And
Yeah.
I would have to say, I mean, the hardest part had been, it was a very steep learning curve, but the hardest part was, when I had already worked with my beekeepers and gotten everything settled, um, it was getting the honey into the UK and working within the UK. And
Mhm.
I expected that part to be easier because we were actually working in a more advanced like market, more developed market, but it was actually more of a headache. And I was quite frustrated by it because things that are meant to be going more smoothly in those areas were not going smoothly. And also, I mean, we face discrimination as an African woman. The discrimination, the harassment you face, you don't expect it in a professional setting, but you do, and it's constant.
Okay. So, Nirina, I hope that answers your question. On to the second question is, this is from Muna. She's called Muna. What can be
Mhm.
done to reform development and private sectors away from their respective negative stereotypes? That is, inefficiency, overlay profits, and oriented negativity.
Um, I'm going to say that, and probably it's going to be a very controversial answer, but I think though, like those institution needs to be overhauled. Like there is no fixing them from the inside. They are completely broken. They are outdated, and they don't serve the purpose of African countries and African people. And I'm not the first person to say that. It's it's been written about, and having experienced it, it just doesn't work for us. We have no like proper agency. There is the decisions are never made for our benefit, and our representative are not forceful enough to make our voice be heard. So I think. Uh, I don't think that you can reform those institutions. I think you need to replace them with something completely new.
So, Muna, I hope that answers your question. And finally, your last question is, could you explain how the beekeeping development industry is in the private sector and how they collaborate with certain governments, bodies, and not donors? What's the relationship between the government and the donors? Is there
So it
friction
depends on
between
the
them?
country. Yeah, there is no clear cut, there's no template for this. Every country has a different setup. And some technical partners are funded by donors. So the donor gives money to the technical partner, which is
Mhm.
maybe the Ethiopian board in the country, and they help out the beekeepers. Some give money directly to the beekeepers. So there is no, like I said, beekeeping is extremely informal, and there is no um, like set way of working. And this is why I kept the local partnership with beekeepers very loose. Each
Yeah.
country is different, so I allow enough leeway and flexibility in how we work so that we can fix problem faster. If I was
Okay.
for a big organization, I wouldn't be able to do that.
All right. Thank you so much, Madvi, for your time. Our time is up.
You're welcome.
We'll
All
move
right,
to
thank
the
you so much for your question.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody who asked questions. And I hope they were well answered. So our second speaker is Heba Sharma. And I already did a small introduction. So she will take about 18 minutes introduction plus her speech and the question time. Welcome, Heba.
Thank you, Jean. It's a pleasure to be here today and to reunite with all PfAL alumni. I'm Heba Shama, an alumni from PfAL 8 from Egypt. I'm a graduate of the MSc in Anthropology and Development Management program at LSE. That was in 2019. And I'm currently the Case Studies Coordinator of the Education 2.0 Research and Documentation Project, RDP. That is a collaboration between the Social Research Center at the American University in Cairo and the Egyptian Ministry of Education and Technical Education. And I'll be talking today about studying educational reform in the digital age. So the way I would like to structure this is I'm going to speak first about the reform before COVID, then what has Egypt done during COVID, and our role in RDP in researching and documenting this reform and using technology to do so. To start with, there has been a move in Egypt towards digital transformation of the pre-tertiary K-12 education sector in Egypt. This vision started in 2015 and came into action in 2017. And it aims to use modern technology for teaching and learning and assessing students, improve the student competencies, and equip them for the 21st century and the fourth industrial revolution. It focuses on multidisciplinary approaches with an emphasis on blended learning and learning for life, not for the exam. So there's a complete shift from studying for the exam and for the grades towards studying for life, and to modernize the education system towards the Egypt 2030 vision. This entailed digitizing the curriculum for all years, having digital books available for free, curriculum development, teacher training, and decreasing the overcrowdedness in classrooms. And this whole vision led to a long-term investment in key aspects that will play a greater role during COVID. The first one was EKB, the Egyptian Knowledge Bank. That is an online digital portal that provides educational and research services to Egyptian researchers from higher education, but also offers a learning management system for secondary school students from grades 10 and 11. There was a teacher first training program, and there was a huge investment in Wi-Fi and digital infrastructures in Egyptian schools, which, like, students in grades 10 and 11 had tablets, they had electronic exams and electronic evaluation. Moving to the COVID period, so in early March, COVID-19 started spreading in Egypt, and in March 15th, there was an announcement of nationwide school closures in Egypt. And there was no blueprint on how to manage the situation as everywhere in the world, but there was a determination from the ministry side to continue education and learning. So just by March 19th, the Ministry of Education launched a new study portal that is study.akb.eg, which was an offshoot of the existing AKB, but now it's providing all curriculum materials from K to 12 students, so that you'll have access to their lessons via interactive presentations and games. Partnerships with Edmodo. So they partnered with Edmodo, that is a platform that offers teachers to have visual classrooms with virtual classrooms with their students, and also allow for communication between students and teachers. And the big step, which was in March 30th, there was a change of the end of year assessment. So all students in the old system were having sit-in exams, and there was a public demand to just cancel the examination. But the ministry, as I said, determined to continue education and learning. So instead of the sit-in exams, grades from 3 to 9 would have end-of-year multidisciplinary research project. We're talking about students in third primary to third preparatory. They're learning about research, what is referencing, what is writing a research. And also students from grade 10, 11, which are secondary 1 and 2. These students used to have open book tablet-based exams in schools, but this was transformed into open book at-home tablet-based examinations. These were almost 1.2 million students, and the grades from 3 to 9 were 19 million students. So the ministry was managing a lot. And by April, there was many platforms, as I said, study.akb, Edmodo, virtual streaming classes portal. There was a portal for the final revisions for secondary school students that was thanawiyah.net. Classes were streamed over TV channels, YouTube channels, and also over radio classes. So us as RDP, we are interested in documenting and researching the reform, but COVID and what happened during COVID was an opportunity that we seized. We wanted to learn how students and the school communities were adapting and navigating this fast changing events. So we relied on oral history as a research methodology to document these experiences through stories and oral narration. And we use technology. We use different online tools and platforms to facilitate our remote qualitative research. But we made sure to abide by all research standards and ethics and to protect our subjects and their data. So as I said, technology facilitated our sampling as well. We were able to reach individuals and school communities online. It allowed us to conduct in-depth oral history interviews over a period of 4 months. We used we were talking to our participants over phone calls and online focus group calls. The online tools also allowed us to interview 25 participants, including parents, students, teachers, and technology specialists from across Egypt. We were able to reach 9 governorates. We reached participants from different urban settings, diverse cultures and backgrounds, varying access to the digital infrastructure. And this would have not been possible without the online tools. We were also doing social media documentation. So to just document the trends, how the school communities are collectively reacting over social media, and to understand the context of how the online education is happening in Egypt. And to speak about the pros and cons of remote research, as I said, we were able to reach many participants from different backgrounds and far apart spaces. But however, this in a way, or remote research in a way, favored participants who had good Wi-Fi and phone connections. And this made it difficult for us to include information of families completely off the grid, like families who don't have landlines or those who live in areas with very weak mobile network connections. It was harder to interview them, to reach them, and even if we reached them, the frequency and quality of the interviews were significantly affected. There was another drawback of this remote research that some participants worried about retribution from participation. Like usually oral history is a very personal process. You meet the participant, you spend time, and then you gain their trust. But for this happening over online tools, there was these fears and worries. Even after we guaranteed everything will be anonymous, the identities will remain anonymous, but participants were worried, and some of these potential participants would be more likely to participate in face-to-face interviews. For the pros of such remote research, as I said, there was no barriers of distance and space. The study can reach individuals and in faraway spaces for little financial cost and without risk of traveling and meeting face to face during the pandemic. There was also an abundance of apps that could facilitate the individual or the group interviews. Like you can name it: Facebook, Messenger, Zoom, Google Meet, Jitsi, WebEx, all of these tools, but you have to somehow go with what the participants prefer and what they are familiar with. But just remember to just make sure to use the offered security steps like meeting passwords, requesting users to log in, or using waiting rooms. Yeah, that's about it. I believe we can have room for questions and answers.
Okay. Thank you, Hiba. So the first question is, 1 minute.
Sure.
So Hiba, the first question is, how is Egypt managing non-citizen students during this COVID time?
So during our research, there was one Yemeni refugee student in the secondary school. He was able to take the tablet as other secondary school students. He was guaranteed the access to the online examinations and the trial exams as well. So I believe that for the majority of if these students are in public Egyptian schools, they have the same access as other citizens. but it depends on the household itself if they have connection to the internet or not. Even if they are they are not connected to the internet, there was classes over TV and over the radio.
Okay. And are there students, the second part of that same question, are there students who wanted to go back home during this pandemic? And how has that been handled? Is it different?
They wanted to go back home? I'm confused. We were interviewing students who were being schooled at home, like they are staying at home. There was a complete school closure.
Oh, yeah, based on the same question of non-citizens, because we have issues of students wanting to go back to their country of origin.
Oh.
So has Egypt facilitated the means for them to find their way back home, pending
I could. Yeah, for the students in higher education, that was not the focus of the study, but for the students in pre-tertiary education, which is kindergarten to secondary, these students were with their families here. That's the most.
Okay.
Those are the ones that we interviewed, at least.
So I hope the person who asked the question has had that answer. Then your second question is, can you expand more on social media use and apps during studies in Egypt within this COVID period? For example, do students use WhatsApp to communicate with teachers? And do teachers use WhatsApp to communicate with students? What are the other methods apart from Zoom?
So there was the official channels that were initiated and launched by the ministry, but of course there was a use of the non-official ones like WhatsApp, Telegram, Facebook is widely used. So there was an age group, especially like primary school students who were not overly on social media, but they could still use Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp. So yeah, WhatsApp and Telegram mainly were main channels for communication. And many students also just accessed YouTube channels to watch their lessons if they couldn't access Edmodo or the study.ekb channels.
Okay. And the third question I got from the viewers is Egypt an Islam state? And if so, what are some of the restrictions enforced that do not apply to other states during this COVID period when it comes to education?
That's an interesting question. Egypt, yes, is a Muslim country. I would say if this didn't come up in our research, like having restrictions, they were not based on religion, but based on culture. So one teacher, for example, said to us that it's harder for him to reach female students rather than his male students because of the families are not allowing their girls to have a cell phone or using WhatsApp or social media. Yeah, that would be my take on that question. I don't know if I answered, but
I hope you did. I'm only the moderator.
yeah.
So Heba, we still have about 3 minutes for you, and I'm seeing two other questions. So the first one is, Heba, the multi-channel approach to remote learning seems promising for inclusion. Did content reach remoteness, poorness? Can less well-resourced places replicate? I don't know if you understand that question.
I know I don't. Can you rephrase it maybe, or?
Let me read it again as I also try to understand it. It's not my question. So the multi-channel approach to remote learning seems promising for inclusion. So I think the multi-diversity methods used in Egypt for learning seems promising.
Yeah.
Then the question comes in, did content reach remoteness? Does this educational content, does it reach the villages, the poor of the poorest?
Yeah.
do poor students gain from these methods in education used during COVID?
Yeah.
And this is a question from Muna.
Yeah.
And she finishes off by asking, can less well-resourced places replicate? So I think she's focusing on the poor sectors of society in Egypt.
Yeah.
Does these reforms and availability of online education and other methods of education that are not physical, do they reach the poor societies in Egypt?
Yeah. So yeah, that's a very important question, and a question even for our research to investigate more, because blended learning is like the ideal thing that it promises to decrease inequality, but that's also to for us to investigate. The students we talked to from the villages, they had weak uh, connection, like Wi-Fi connection. Some of them couldn't even afford the bundles to pay for internet to just access the classes, and they used the TV classes and the classes over radio. But still, these students had many other challenges. The household itself, it was not suitable enough to study. There is an assumption that each kid could have a room and study, but still, communal areas are not like well equipped for them to study. Their parents were not having the enough time to support them, because now, like, blended learning now is having, like, parents are playing a greater role with their kids. Some of these families didn't have this luxury. They couldn't take time off. They were they had limited educational backgrounds. So they couldn't support with these new technologies and new platforms that they are not even aware of. So
Okay. Based on that, does the government provide things like data bundles for students
for students in
during
secondary,
this time?
yeah, for students in secondary 10 and 11, there was a SIM card provided by the Ministry of Telecommunication. Like, each student will receive a SIM card that has a bundle, and it's free. And the government subsidized the login for these platforms. So if you log in to these platforms, it doesn't take from your data. But still, that didn't work for all students. So I think now that's why the Ministry of Education is again investing so much into TV channels and streaming these classes on TV, because we'll say that most students would have access to TV more than internet. But still, there are students who don't have even TV, so there are coordination for radio classes. I believe in October, the schools will also go blended learning, so they will go for some days in school and some days at home, studying at home, watching TV, and doing some homework and some studying. So there are,
Okay.
yeah, to summarize, there are some efforts. They cannot reach everyone yet, I would say.
Okay, that's fine. So we do have 3 minutes, Heba. And I think the second, you can answer two more questions.
Sure, yeah.
So there's a question at Heba. Which recommendations would you make for future policies in this area based on your provisional research results?
Yeah.
Should I repeat the question?
So our study results we're still developing them, but from the preliminary findings, we found that students, although these platforms were great and they could reach different platforms, the students, especially in primary and in the early years, they needed more support from teachers. So there could be other ways that teachers could play a greater role, because of COVID, everything was top down. But I think the ministry now, for the October term, they have realized that schools and local teachers have a greater role to play. So this has to be capitalized on. Also, students were creative in a way. Like, there were some solutions from students. Like, some of them lost the tablet pen; they couldn't write in the exam, so they used um, a carrot or something to write on. And like, there's an availability of, like, students can be creative, but still they need more support. and they also need local support. The hotlines were there, but we still need to invest more in this. These would be, and parents as well. Parents need a kind of support, maybe not just from the Ministry of Education, because now students will be at home for 2 or 4 days in a week. So their parents need to some kind of support for them to manage this with their kids. If they are going to play a key role in this, they need more support.
Okay, so Hiba, you have 1 more minute, and there's this one last question from Ruth M that just came in.
Yeah.
And it says, Hiba, what is the digital literacy level among the participants, students in Egypt? What is the literacy level in your country?
Digital literacy?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the exact percentage, but what we found through our qualitative interviews with students, especially, there was some kind of they could use technology, but not for education. So they could use different apps, but not into logging into a library and understand how to navigate the study.akb, for example. And this was also apparent in our talks with teachers. They would say students learn by trial and error, but not that they are familiar with these apps or they learned how to find information or how to access their classes. So there still needs to be more work on to familiarizing students with the use of technology for education as well.
Mm-hmm. So, thank you, Heba, for your time. I did notice that we have done a bit of maybe 2 questions more than we should have, but you have been within your time. But for Madvi, we did a bit less. And there's some questions coming in for Madvi that I would like you to answer before we go to Divine, if that's okay, for the next 2 minutes. Madvi?
Sure. Yeah, I'm here.
Yes. So let me just retrieve them. 1 minute. So Madvi, most of your viewers are saying you're speaking the truth. They're happy with what you're saying. But one, Muna asks, what can be done to reform development and the private sector away from their respective negative stereotypes? Did we answer that?
Yes, we did.
Okay,
That was
so this is the new question. I don't quite agree that dismantling multi-terrorism is the right way forward. I speak of MD that pursue their interests. What do you have to say to that, Madvi?
There depends on which MDBs we're talking about. There are several ones, like there are several ones that operate on the African continent. I have myself worked for the African Development Bank many times, and I do think being an African institution, it has the interests of the people on the continent more than the others. But again, you know, any big organization comes with bureaucracy and complexities that, in theory, seems easy to overcome. But when you start working, like when you're on the inside, there are so many layers of I guess, intricacies to work through that sometimes these take away from the mission. And I'm not saying that all of them should be like dismantled. I said like some of them have to be replaced with something better and that have our interests at heart.
So
and
I dismantling multilateralism or not? And if so, why?
But it depends on which one. but I think the person mentioned MDBs, which are development banks. Development bank has so the AFDB would have the interest of African people. The Asian Development Bank should have the interest of the Asian people. So, like I'm saying, like if you are working in Africa for an development bank meant to advance the status of African people, and if you're doing it, even if you're not doing it efficiently, if you're doing it and you are improving the life of people, I think there is space for reform there, or to make things better. But that's not like all the institutions out there. That's just one example.
Okay, so Eustace, that's Eustace. I hope your question is answered. So I'm going to move forward to our last speaker, Divine, and he's going to speak to us for about 20 minutes on a general approach to this topic, which is development, the private sector, and technology, looking from his area of expertise and being one of our fast PfALers. I think he has a lot of wisdom to share. So Divine, kindly proceed.
Thank you. I think time is fast, so I'm just gonna wrap everything up within 6 minutes.
Okay, sorry. Just maybe give a brief background
Okay.
of your
So
professionalism so they can
completed.
understand questions to ask.
I completed the LSE as part of PfAL 5, and I studied international relations, MSc International Relations. Onward from LSE, I went on to work with the Bank of England, Barclays, and now I am working with Right Q Assurance. I am an information security consultant by profession, and previously served in the British Army for 6 years. At the moment, I'll say I have a secondary role as an entrepreneur, and I have a company which I lead on the development of branded hotels. Currently, we are developing a Radisson Red in Accra. I am also leading on renewable energy, supplying solar energy and technology to industries in Ghana. At the moment, we're working on a 50 watts solar farm for diamond cement in Ghana. Okay, so I'm going to focus mainly because of time on technology, and I want to look at how Africa is prepared for the challenges of the growing technology risk and data protection. As we can see, or we've all seen in the news in the past few months, someone can sit in a hotel in Dubai and tap into US government system and steal $3 million. Someone could sit in Nigeria and tap into a Premier League company account and emails and be able to divert emails that will bring them money. And as we have seen, people can sit in Ghana and fall in love with someone somewhere. And so cybercrime has become the norm and is growing rapidly in Africa. But it's not just in Africa, it's happening, or the attempts are even more in many places. However, many regions have prepared for this by instituting standards in place. For example, within the UK, in fact, I'll say within Europe, Americas, and Asia Pacific, they've all adopted the international standard, the ISO 27001, which drives best cybersecurity practices that should be adopted by every company, whether public or private. And it is enforced by the government. It is put in law. And for example, at the moment, the UK government has come out with a less expensive standard called the ISME governance and Cyber Essentials. And for you to even get a government contract, you need to be Cyber Essentials certified as a company, which shows that you are audited and you have mechanisms in place to protect customer information. You have the right patching in place for your network, and you have the right training in terms of cyber or information security, or you have basic understanding of how to protect and defend computer systems. Without that, you are not allowed to even apply for government contracts within the UK or public sector contracts. But in Africa, we don't have anything like that at the moment. But COVID-19 alone has really shown that Africa can actually shift into using technology a lot more in education sector, even in commerce. So if this is going to happen, what do we have in place? For example, for the universities, where we know people would like to hack into systems to change their own grades if they have the opportunities to. What are we going to do for the banks? What system is in place for the banks to ensure that that they have stringent mechanisms in place to protect customers in terms of not data alone, but in terms of the entire network systems. So I think there's a lot of opportunities here for national governments, one, and two, for private companies and individuals as well. National governments will develop the standards and they will enforce the standards, one. And two, individuals and private companies will begin to do these trainings for the banks, for the public sector offices, and for anyone who require certification and understanding of those standards to be able to trade in the country. Once that is in place, it does not entirely eradicate the risk of fraud or any attack. But what it does is it reduces the risk of that happening because many people are now aware. Every company trains its new employee, and there is always an annual training on what to do when you see an email saying, click this and it will give you this. If you do, your network is down. And that happened to the shipping company Maersk. Somebody clicked in the organization, clicked a link, and the entire system shut down. So ships on the sea lost their navigations because someone clicked a link. So how do we prevent that in Africa? And also, how do we stop someone sitting somewhere in, for example, in Dubai and moving money from or signing checks as a president of a country? How do we prevent all those things? And it all comes to initiating cyber standards and following them strictly and implementing data governance as well in those places. So in a nutshell, we need the standards. And number two, when the standards come, there's opportunity for everyone there, both in private sector and also in the public sector. That way, we are prepared to meet any challenges of cyber risk or data protection issues. But we need the national governments to take action first. And how do we drive that? Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move into the question section for Divine. And I have 3 questions for you, Divine. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
So the first one, how does hoteliering use technology to expand?
Thank you. So the hotel industry uses technology mainly for payments and marketing. And the payment industry is highly regulated. And to even get Visa to accept cards in your hotel, you have to really go under what they call the PCI standards, which the card standard is a payment card industry standard that you have to follow, that you will protect customers' payment card information. So for you to be able to accept cards mean you can definitely accept all kinds of customers who can come to your hotel, even just as someone who is coming just to have a meal and go. It's one way of expanding on your sales. Technology also can help in terms of renewable energy aspects to save energy and to provide clean energy as well for hotels. And we have a few hotels attempting to do that in Ghana right now. And they want to operate only on renewable energy technologies. So technology can be used both from the design and then also to the operation aspects of the hotel.
Okay, I hope that answers that. So your second question, Divine, comes from Ruth M. Divine, how do we as users act vigilantly towards our own security when using digital platforms, especially digital cash platforms? That comes from Ruth.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. So we as individuals, we have to be careful who we are paying in the first place. And it's true. For example, like what happened between Lazio and another football team when Hush Papi was able to take the payment on behalf of Lazio, is because they didn't double check things. So someone can send you a payment link. I can send you a payment link from PayPal right now. Someone can also use my name and put a dot in between, 2 letters. So that can create a different PayPal account. But you need to know who you owe. And you need to verify if you're not sure you're paying the right account. If you do that, you are protecting yourself and you don't have to pay 2 times. That is one. Number 2, we have to have that awareness that the threat is there. And we must always, always ensure that we know what we are doing before we go ahead to do it in terms of payment online. Thank you.
Okay, so your third question is, and this is coming from Matt.
Okay.
How do you protect customer credentials once the hotels are up and running? That is the credit cards, the personal information of the customer, client.
Thank you. So, for example, as I mentioned, there's a PCI payment card industry standard to follow. One, your system must be encrypted. So if you make payment, for example, you sit in your house and you book a Radisson Red hotel from, let's say you are in Rwanda and you book a Radisson hotel in Accra with your card. We should ensure that our network is encrypted so that the transmission of your details are secure. No one can break into that encryption. That is how it is. It has to be encrypted for the transmission of your payment details to come through. And if we don't have that in place, Visa wouldn't allow us for you to even pay through to us because it won't come. And MasterCard wouldn't allow us. WorldPay wouldn't allow us. So we have to strictly be certified by the PCI industry. It's a global industry that, yes, we have encryption in place, we have safes in place, and we don't leave even receipts around. We follow what we call clear desk policies, and we train our workers to ensure that they exercise clean desk policy. For example, if they have to leave their desk, they can't leave the computer screen on. So it has to be clear desk. So you have to lock the screen before you leave. If you leave it on, anyone can do anything on that system. It can even be your colleague. So you must always ensure you lock your screen. And people.
So do you train your employees for this?
Yes. They have to be trained, and before it's part of the induction process. They are well trained, and the disciplinary process when it comes to that is quite tough, because if you don't do it, then we are going to be fined by PCI.
Okay, so there's another question coming in from Nirina, and she's saying, Divine, any thoughts, recommendations on the use of cloud services like AWS, Azure, and the likes?
Yeah, so AWS and Azure, we also have some from other suppliers, private suppliers. Yes, Azure is quite big. AWS is big. Azure is Microsoft supplier, and they are all secure. They are all secure because they only ensure that their representatives are trained on the systems to be able to provide that cloud service. Cloud services are the best if you don't want to be responsible for losing somebody's data. You operate cloud. So your third party, who is your client, managing the data for you, if something goes wrong, they are responsible, not you. So if you don't have, or you want to save money on employees, then cloud services are best for you.
Okay, so you seem to be a hotcake on this panel. There's another question coming in, but this is from Anonymous. What regulatory measures can African governments put in place to protect users from the negative surveillance capitalism perpetuated from Silicon Valley? Should I repeat that?
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
What regulatory measures can African governments put in place to protect users from the negative surveillance capitalism perpetuated from Silicon Valley? Like, how can African governments protect online users from surveillance, such as, like, I know, for example, you have iPhones.
Yeah.
They can find your location without you typing in.
Yeah. So I think for that question, it's quite tough for anyone to run away from this. Some countries operate non-surveillance kind of policies. For example, in Germany, if you are caught spying on people or your employees, maybe some of you might have heard it in the news, Barclays is being dragged to court for spying on employees to see what they're using the computers for. So some countries have that policy there. Germany is one of those. And I think Poland has a strict one as well. So you can't really spy on your employees or people. Now, but many countries don't. So then the advantage goes to the supplier of that gadget. So you're using an iPhone, and maybe an iPhone is an American gadget, for example, and they have a stake in the government, or the government has a stake in it, or else they won't operate. So yeah, the government defends them everywhere. So they have to do what their government says. Number two, you might have heard about what's the name of this supplier? The one that came with the 5G right now, and it's a Chinese company, and they are being accused of spying on people with their phones. Huawei, yes, it's Huawei. So for example, so it depends on which phone you use. You can't escape it. If you use Huawei, then there's that rumor that China is spying on you. If you choose to use a US made equipment, you cannot run away from it. I think you should just be, you can use what we call virtual private network, the VPN, to browse, but it's quite expensive. So if you use the VPNs, it goes into private mode. But if you use just a normal internet, they can always know where you are, or your network supply, they will always know where you are.
Okay, thank you so much. Those are our speakers for today. I hope you have been enlightened. Everybody's question has been answered. And if not, feel free to ask the organizers for emails of our speakers who can share with you their research work and all that. But that's all for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Okay, thank you everybody for that fantastic panel. That was truly amazing. Well, that was one of two panels. I've been watching both of them at the same time. Yeah, it was great to hear from you, from all our panelists, Madvi, Divine, Heba, Steve, Naomi, and Emmanuel. Thank you for taking the time to share like so much of your knowledge. I wish we could go on longer. When we're in Ghana next year, we'll have the right amount of time to really speak to every single issue that's been raised today. I want to thank our moderators, Jean and Zachary. You guys did a fantastic job. It's been really great having you draw out so many questions from our PfALers and speak about so many issues. I just want to finish on what we'll be doing tomorrow, which will be our PfAL only session. It's all about how we can further develop the network, because as you see, there's such great ideas and so many smart people involved in this that we really must take advantage of it more. And with all the challenges that have been spoken about, we do have the knowledge and the know-how on how to address a lot of these. So we will be working with a company called Curve Learning and Development, and they 100% work all on human connectivity, network building. They're gonna come tomorrow with ideas about how to harness all this great talent and how we can empower you as PfAL more to make these connections and to push so many of these great ideas. We'll be starting at 10 a.m. BST, British Summer Time, and we'll have, I think it's going to be about 2.5 to 3 hours of sessions with breaks and all that, and hopefully done by 2 p.m. Again, I want to thank Manoush for coming to speak to us, Faraz, Tim, all of our speakers, the guys who did the presentations. It has just truly been a pleasure to plan this with you, to see you roll it out. And yes, looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow. So come with your networking hats on, and we'll be building a better, bigger PfAL. Have a great evening, everybody. Bye. Hats on, and we'll